Welcome to Dark Secrets of True Crime, where we confront the shadows that linger in human history. Tonight, we journey into the heart of a darkness so profound, it redefined the meaning of horror. This is the story of a man whose name became synonymous with depravity, a man who haunted the city of Milwaukee, turning quiet suburban life into a slaughterhouse of unimaginable secrets. We are talking about Jeffrey Lionel Dahmer, the Milwaukee Monster. Over the course of 13 years, Dahmer murdered 17 young men and boys. His crimes were unique, not just in their brutality, but in their chilling ambition to fully possess and control his victims, even attempting to create what he chillingly called living zombies. This is a narrative built on psychological pathology, necrophilia, cannibalism, and perhaps most tragically, a damning testament to systemic failure that allowed a monster to operate unnoticed for over a decade. We warn our listeners, the details of this case are graphic and disturbing. We tell this story not to sensationalize evil, but to understand the depth of the tragedy and, crucially, to honor the victims whose lives were so unjustly erased. Prepare yourself. The nightmare begins now. Jeffrey Dahmer was born in 1960. From the outside, his childhood in Bath, Ohio appeared typical, but beneath the surface brewed a lethal cocktail of isolation and morbid fascination. His mother, Joyce, struggled with mental illness and depression, and his father, Lionel, a chemist, was often distant and focused on his studies. The turning point was arguably his increasingly isolated teenage years. It was during this time that Dahmer developed his unsettling obsession with dead animals. He would collect roadkill, meticulously dissect them in the garage, bleach their bones, and preserve them. This wasn't merely a boy's morbid hobby. It was a rehearsal. It was the moment the future killer began conflating biological curiosity with the desire to control life and death. As his parents' toxic marriage dissolved, Dahmer, left alone in the family home at age 18, dove into alcoholism. His internal fantasies, revolving around a completely passive, submissive male partner, had fully developed and were now pushing him toward action. That moment arrived in June 1978. The first victim was Stephen Hicks, an 18-year-old hitchhiker Dahmer lured back to his home with promises of beer and companionship. When Hicks tried to leave, Dahmer panicked. He struck Hicks with a dumbbell, strangled him, and then, in an act that defined his future pattern, dissected and dismembered the body, dissolving the remains with chemicals and burying them. Dahmer described the experience as having been driven by a terrifying need to possess Hicks completely. Following a brief, unsuccessful stint in the U.S. Army, and then living with his grandmother in West Allis, Wisconsin, Dahmer's urges were briefly suppressed. He was convicted of indecent exposure in 1982 and again struggled with alcohol abuse. For 9 years, he was relatively dormant, but the internal pressure was building. The true escalation began in 1987. After moving into his own apartment, he killed Stephen Toomey in November 1987. Toomey's murder marked the beginning of the Milwaukee killings, establishing the horrific pattern of hunting, luring, drugging, and ultimately killing the young men he desired. By 1990, Dahmer moved into apartment 213 at 924 North 25th Street in Milwaukee, the epicenter of his final and most brutal killing spree. This small, nondescript apartment became the site of 12 murders over just 1 year.
Dahmer's methodology was meticulously organized and terrifyingly cold. He used local gay bars, bus stops, and malls to find victims, often offering them money for drinks or photo shoots. Once inside, he would use a potent combination of alcohol and sleeping pills, often the drug temazepam, to incapacitate them. His focus had shifted from merely killing to the grotesque pursuit of permanent possession. This led to the chilling experiments, drilling into the victims' skulls, injecting hydrochloric acid or other chemicals into their brains in a deranged attempt to lobotomize them and create a submissive, compliant love slave. When these experiments failed, he would resort to strangulation. It was in this apartment that the acts of cannibalism and necrophilia became routine. Dahmer confessed to having eaten parts of his victims, often consuming the muscle or heart, believing it helped him absorb their life force. The evidence discovered later, the jars of preserved organs, the skulls, the severed heads in the freezer, painted a picture of a man living a completely different, horrifying reality behind his locked door.
What is perhaps most infuriating about the Dahmer case is the undeniable fact that he had multiple opportunities to be stopped, but was shielded by systemic prejudice. The most infamous instance occurred on the night of May 27, 1991. Dahmer had drugged and assaulted 14-year-old Konerak Sinthasomphone. Konerak, naked and bleeding, stumbled out of the apartment and was found by 3 women, including Glenda Cleveland, Dahmer's neighbor. Cleveland desperately called the police, insisting the boy was hurt and was likely a child. When officers John Baltzerzak and Joseph Gabrish arrived, Dahmer was calm and highly manipulative. He convinced the officers that Konerak was his 19-year-old lover who had simply had too much to drink. The key factor here? Racism and homophobia. The officers viewed the situation through a prejudiced lens, dismissing the incident as a minor, consensual domestic dispute between 2 gay adults. They ignored the desperate pleas of Glenda Cleveland.
You're looking for a
and
monster.
in one of the most tragic errors in American policing history, returned Konerak Sinthasomphone to Jeffrey Dahmer. Within an hour, Konerak was murdered, becoming the 13th victim. Glenda Cleveland continued to call and protest the police handling of the situation, but was repeatedly ignored. This horrific failure to protect a minor, solely based on assumptions about his race and sexual orientation, exposed a deep, toxic flaw within the Milwaukee Police Department.
The nightmare ended less than 2 months later, on July 22, 1991. Thanks to the bravery of Tracy Edwards. Edwards, an intended victim, managed to fight off Dahmer and escape the apartment while still handcuffed. When police entered apartment 213, they discovered the Polaroids, hundreds of graphic, staged photos of the bodies at various stages of dismemberment. This discovery led to the immediate full search that uncovered the sheer horror: human remains stored in every conceivable place. Dahmer's subsequent confession was meticulous and chilling. He detailed all 17 murders without remorse. At trial in 1992, the defense pursued the plea of guilty but insane, arguing that his necrophilia was a mental disorder rendering him incapable of controlling his actions. However, the prosecution successfully argued that his elaborate planning, covering up, and manipulation proved he knew the difference between right and wrong. The jury agreed, sentencing Dahmer to 15 consecutive life terms in Wisconsin, with an additional term for the Ohio murder.
The case of Jeffrey Dahmer remains a watershed moment in true crime, forcing us to ask difficult questions, not just about the nature of evil, but about the structure of our society. My perspective is clear. Dahmer was an embodiment of calculated, predatory evil. But his longevity as a serial killer was a direct result of societal indifference. He didn't just operate in the shadows, he operated in the blind spots deliberately created by prejudice. We must always remember that the majority of Dahmer's victims were marginalized, poor, men of color, and gay. Their identities placed them at a fatal intersection where their disappearance was deemed less worthy of investigation by authorities. The police's failure to act on Glenda Cleveland's desperate calls was not a simple mistake. It was a grievous moral failing rooted in racism and homophobia. It teaches us a brutal truth. When law enforcement operates with bias, it is the most vulnerable among us who pay the ultimate price. Furthermore, the media's enduring fascination with Dahmer and the recent fictionalized portrayals presents a significant ethical dilemma for those of us in the true crime space. There's a fine line between analysis and exploitation. When we focus endlessly on the killer's childhood, his psychology, and the gruesome details, we risk turning a genuine human tragedy into mere entertainment. We risk humanizing the monster while silencing the victims. We should study this case not to satisfy a morbid curiosity, but as a cautionary tale, a demand for accountability from institutions that have sworn to protect all citizens equally, regardless of their background or identity. The legacy of Jeffrey Dahmer is not just the 17 lives he took, but the systemic neglect that enabled him to take them.
Jeffrey Dahmer was ultimately murdered in prison in 1994, closing the chapter on his life. But for the families of Stephen Hicks, Stephen Tuomi, Konerak Sinthasomphone, Tony Hughes, and Ernest Miller, and the 12 others, the pain endures. We close this discussion by affirming the importance of their names over the name of the man who took them. Thank you for confronting this dark truth with us. If you found this analysis insightful, please like this video, subscribe to your channel name, and let us know your thoughts in the comments below. What do you believe was the single greatest systemic failure in this case? Join us next time as we continue our mission to shed light on the darkness. Until then, stay safe.